The next speaker we have is Michael Cote from Tanzu, and he will speak about two buzzwords, platform engineering and AI. The stage is yours, Michael.
Hello. Sorry for a little cough. I've been trying to perfect breathing and drinking all my life, and I haven't succeeded yet. But maybe the next sip is another time. So, thanks for taking the time to come to this talk. It's always fun to speak at. This is actually the second time I've been here. This is a great conference center, so it's nice that it's hosted here. Well, what I'm going to go over is what, at least as far as I can determine, but what it seems like we know about doing platform engineer or operations for doing AI in private cloud. And I think obviously this is important now because people want it. Always a good reason to do something. And probably a lot of people in this room, you're being asked to sort it out and figure it out. Or maybe you think it's super cool and you want to do it on your own, which is always a great reason for a technologist to do things, especially if you can give the mess to someone else when you lose interest with it. So, kind of to that point, I think it's good context setting, especially if you're, in an operations, an SRE, DevOps, platform engineering, whatever you want to call yourself. I'm an application developer, so I just lump it all together into stuff I use. Or I used to be one, I should say. But it's important to kind of keep in mind, as I was joking, what is going on and valuable. And so this is actually a very recent survey asking probably sort of management types or people who would have priority, what's important to you? Now, I always find it complicated to read these multi-value bar charts because you really have to think about what's going on there. But that's fine. But if you kind of read through these and you kind of collate them together, you can see that probably, as always, security is very important. That's like asking what your number one priority with food is, which I think it should taste good. It just is taken for granted that things need to be secure. And if you're answering a survey, are you ever going to be like, security? Nope, no, not a priority. Probably always going to be number one, which doesn't mean we should dismiss it, but the interesting stuff is below. And what you can kind of see is there are lots of interest in AI, but what kind of dominates the areas of interest is all that old crap we have to deal with all the time. Modernization, maintenance, just keeping things up and running. So I would say, and then we'll get into not exactly this advice, if you were to pick what was most valuable to your organization, probably just upgrading your stuff is going to be valuable for the next 12 months instead of getting stuck doing things. But in the meantime, why not some AI? That would be fun. So this is a summary of, I think, what in talking with other people and observing what some of the organizations we work with do and, just gathering all the stuff. I just make slides, so I don't really do any of this stuff. I just talk with people. But this is kind of a notion and a list of what operations, sort of platform engineer types will probably focus on. Now, I use the question marks there for things that I'm not sure if they fit in there. They may or may not. But I think the other ones are pretty, they make sense of what would happen, and they can kind of lay out what you should be planning around. Obviously, hosting, whether you want to be all technical and cool and call it inference, but hosting the models and the LLMs so people can just use them, the inference. Having application frameworks, as I'll get into, registries for the plugins. If you look at this list and you've ever hosted a platform before, you're like, yes, every single other thing I've ever done in a platform, right? In kind of an enterprisey context. And there are some things that are particular to it. Notably as we kind of sort out in the AI world what the kind of extension, the plugin thing is, whether it's model context protocol stuff or someone figures out how to generalize the Claude skill stuff or whatever. That kind of stuff is something more unique to the AI stuff. And of course, you all are probably going to be in charge of the cost controls, monitoring for that, all your observability, all the AI, FinOps, Biz3, DevOps engineering stuff that's going to emerge and come up. So get ready for that. So as far as roles and responsibilities, I think this is a good early cut. In addition to what is already going on with platforms. And I keep saying platform, which I'll get into soon. If you're not, just very briefly, I pretty much mean the evolution of platform as a service. But we'll get to a vendor-neutral Cloud Native Computing Foundation definition so that you can feel informed on it. But if you look at the roles and responsibilities, there's the things that already the platform engineers do here, or whoever you want to call it. But then at the bottom, you can see where the division of responsibility for what you do with AI stuff kind of starts to emerge. And as you would expect, the developers develop, right? They use the access to the models that they have. They write the applications around it. Hopefully, they figure out who uses the software and the problems they have and kind of tune the software that they do to it. Back when I programmed, that was not really a concern. And you kind of move over to the people running it, and you can see that they're the ones who are in charge, just like any other type of service or middleware, to use an older term, of running the stuff, keeping it updating, that kind of your controls and costs and things like that. And then, this is where over towards the, I guess that would be your left, where things are a little bit up in the air, like who decides which models to use, who kind of fits them to the purposes that you have, and who kind of decides when to update them. Is that an operations person, or is that a data scientist, whatever that means? It's a very cool term. Maybe you should move into that area, call yourself a data scientist reliability engineer, whatever that may be. But it's a good term that you could use, and it probably goes more towards, they're the subject matter experts, so maybe they're the ones who start to do it. So that's a very quick summary of what seems to be going on at the moment when people are trying to, let's say, manage the delivery of AI services in their organization, right? So that's me, very briefly. I worked at, it was Pivotal and now VMware and now Tanzu by Broadcom for about almost 11 years now, come December, January I mean. And I've been lucky to work with large organizations that are just figuring out how to do their software better. It's a very hand-wavy way of putting it, but I've written several books, and I worked at other places like an analyst firm called RedMonk and another one called 451. And I'm from Austin, Texas originally, so you have to serve a compulsory 2-year term at Dell. So I worked on M&A and corporate strategy there. Back in 2010 to 2011 when they wanted to do software in public cloud, which was thrilling to be involved in at a hardware vendor. And I do several podcasts and stuff like that. Engage with my brand if you want to. So when there's an area like this that's relatively new, I like to sort of start with a bunch of homework or citations. This is all a bunch of stuff that if you're vaguely interested in this and you feel like I've just served you like a small appetizer, you can get a lot more details by looking through these things. I mean, I guess you can't necessarily go talk to all the customers that we talk with, but I probably could introduce you to them. But there's some great talks and other things that go over people's direct experience with. There's actually, I haven't watched all of them, but I don't have it on this list, but of all places, at the Gradle conference, there's several really great talks about how people are delivering AI and using AI inside their organization, mostly for programmers. But yeah, I would check out several of these. The most surprising one, well, not surprising, but you wouldn't expect, is this one by Angie Jones from, they used to be called Square, but they went 3-dimensional, and now they're block. But they go over how they're having, normals use AI and running that, but it's a curious one to look at. So why the private cloud angle? Well, one, because that's what we're interested in where I work, but that wouldn't be satisfying. But if you look at surveys and discussions that I have, a lot of people are thinking about doing AI, not only using publicly hosted ones, but running it on their own. Now, what premises that means or where it's located, the point is they want to have lots of control over how they're using AI, not just having developers go directly towards it. And you can see that in a survey and just anecdotally from talking with people about this, especially, at larger organizations. And, of course, back home in America, no one cares about this, but also you got, the trustworthiness of America as far as a premises to run your stuff in has been steadily plummeting, which is fantastic for people like me. But, it does, whether let's never mind calling it sovereign cloud, let's call it not America cloud, right? And so there's a lot of interest in that kind of thing, but also just purely having it on your own for all sorts of reasons. I was just talking with some banks over in London, and they are very interested in well, let's assume that all of our IT just shuts down because of hacks or something, and now we need to stand it up from scratch. So there's all these interesting scenarios that people are going through that makes private cloud interesting for AI. So let's go over the platform. What a platform is, just as a basic, in case you've never encountered this, and what it's kind of shaping up to look like when you are using it as a, let's say, an AI, not AI enabled as in it uses it, but one that can provide AI services to people. So whenever you talk about platform engineering, you have to have this quote from the famous 2018 ThoughtWorks blog post defining a platform. So I've done that. Now, if you want to see a better visual of what a platform is, this is that CNCF thing I was saying. This came out several years ago, and it's great, because then I can show you a vendor-full version of a platform, but then a vendor-neutral one, which is always nice, because it's more educational for people. But if you look at this, people don't call this a platform as a service anymore. That's a terrible word you're not supposed to use, except when you want to. I guess it's a phrase technically. But it's basically what you would expect in a platform as a service, right? If you look at it, it's like if I'm supporting people who are writing their own organization, their own applications, developers, what's all the stuff they need to support it? The services, the middleware, the way that it's configured, the way you have your dependencies mapped together, all of that stuff to run an application that's not just a simple app on a laptop. And there's other things in there, right? Like how you interface with the infrastructure, and what makes platform engineering different than just like every single other go at this that we've had probably since, Babbage or something, is there's a notion that we should go up the stack as the platform and integrate very tightly with things, for lack of a better phrase, like portals, or the build tools that the developers use, or the way that they look around for APIs and other projects. Like if you're working inside an organization and you want to figure out how to interact with the payments team, you can't just like search Google and go to GitHub to like look for that information, right? So there's this whole discovery of that kind of thing. There's a great talk, I think from 2 years ago, from DevOps Days Amsterdam, that the Bull people gave, that goes over this layer, which is really fantastic if you're into that kind of backstagey internal developer portal instead of platform discussion and want to dive into that. So let's look at how, and by the way, this is the best platform that exists if you want to use it. I highly recommend it. Let's look at how people are thinking about what does a platform look like when you have AI capability going through it. So this is from, if you remember the people who said DevOps was dead, this is their thinking on the topic. And as you look through this, it's kind of giving you kind of like it's not a crosscut, but all of the activities going through a platform that would involve something that you're doing with AI, right? So, you can see how getting access to the data is in there, having like an orchestrator control all the various things that you're doing with your AI stuff. I mentioned going close to the developer with the portals and the IDEs and things they have. So, that's in there as well. But if you want to read up on these articles down here, that'll give you a sense of like, what's the all-in view, kind of like the technical parts, the boxes that start getting added to a platform. Now, if you're more of a management type, and you don't just immediately turn off something when the words like Gartner show up, this is a great talk that will go over what the process and the kind of like strategy and the layers that people are doing in the platform area, right? Which is, I used to be an analyst at a much smaller place. But what's nice about them, if you work at a large organization, is that's who they talk to multiple times every single day. So they're getting a sense of what happens in large, regular organizations that do more than just like let you show your friends what kind of sandwich you've eaten and things like that. So this is another great, I know I'm just saying, go look at this other stuff. But what's valuable about this is, getting a sense of even more of where those roles and responsibilities are, but how you start to slice up the stack, and therefore how you can think about what the organization looks like and who does what. So let's look at two things I think are obvious that maybe not right now, unless you want to leave, which is fine. But things that are pretty obvious that is you should be doing if you're going to be running AI in a platform way for developers using it and other people that I think I actually see some places. Now, like I said, I used to be an application developer. And while these are quite old pictures, I'm pretty sure they're still the same. They really are kind of, a little too fun-loving. They don't mind looking stupid. And they really don't care about much beyond writing their applications, right? So these are not the kind of people that if you're worried about security or, kind of like runaway things happening, some great unknown that you're going to bring into your system, that's going to be exactly what they want to do. And they don't really care to be told they shouldn't be doing it otherwise. And I know that from firsthand experience. I think, again, I haven't talked to a lot of application developers recently, but I would be shocked if it has changed at all, right? So there's probably plenty of developers who are using these things already. And I think what's important is to get ahead of that and kind of learn from the past that if you don't find something your developers like using and start managing it, and don't use this word, controlling it, then you're going to lose very quickly, right? And so be aware of that sort of thing. And one, it's good to talk to your developers if you don't know them yet. Now to that end, when you put something in place, and this is a very thrillingly crude diagram, but it's kind of based on what I've seen several organizations do. To make it really simple, you have some service that remember these people? These crazy developers want to use. Now, the first option is they could go directly to that service, to those little publicly hosted API services down there, which they're probably doing right now. Find the ones who complain about your virus scanners, and I bet they're doing that. They will do that, but instead of that happening early on, all you need to do is think about putting a gateway or a broker in place, right? And all you're doing is, before you kind of lose track of all these crazy developers, these people, make sure they go to that gateway, right? And then, of course, you're controlling where that gateway goes. Now, the whole thing we know about platform engineering is the contract you have with them is it won't be terrible, right? They'll be able to access the kinds of things they want. It'll be easier for them to access and, sanctioned, all of that kind of stuff. So that's what you need to deliver with them. And thankfully, there's several of these gateways available right now that people are using. And it's a good idea to just put that in place and very early on get people to use that, because reining them back to it, I don't know if you've ever tried to do that. It's very difficult and tedious. Now, as things like, again, whatever they end up being, right now, Model Context Protocol is a great way of doing. If you don't know what it is, it's kind of just like plugins and API access widgets, to really kind of demean it, that you can hook up to an AI and it can just get access to things and do things. And in that area, this is another area where there's some very early thinking that it's probably a good idea to figure out in your platform how to run those in severely locked down VMs or containers that maybe have no network access except one little thing, right? And if you actually look at if you played around with Claude Skills, that's exactly what they do. It's kind of brilliant in the way they do this. It's not MCP stuff, but it gives you an idea of how to architect kind of securely containing those things. And then finally, not only accessing these public things, but to the private cloud point, you can start to host your own ways of doing models. You can do, all of your vGPUs and shard things out and all of that thrilling stuff. But that kind of stuff is available, and it's worth looking into right now to get in place so that your developers don't just go run wild about things. Now, to that point, and this is the platform engineering part, it's worth considering that anytime you deliver infrastructure to developers, even the coolest models and inference and APIs and stuff, this is basically what you're giving the developers, a blinking cursor, right? And they have to bring their frameworks to it, their methodology to it, what they're going to do. All they have is this blinking cursor of something. And so it's worth thinking, what can we do beyond that to help them out even more and help ourselves out anymore by kind of guiding what they're doing? And I think this is the overall philosophy of meeting developers where they are. And to that notion, to that idea, especially in larger organizations and in private cloud situations, it's good to be aware of what languages kind of are pervasive in that area. Because you look at once again, I've used an analyst here instead of the Stack Overflow survey or even the RedMonk index or all of these things, because actually JavaScript and Python are extremely popular, but these other two languages, which usually put people to sleep when you talk about them, are actually pervasively used in large organizations and in these private cloud areas, right? So when you're considering building the platform for people, it's worth thinking what languages did they use? And therefore, what frameworks should you try to provide to them? And which frameworks have easy integration and compatibility with the way that you want to run your AI stuff, right? Because you don't want just a blinking cursor, because then they're going to layer all sorts of stuff on top. You want to help as much as possible with what they're doing. So let's go over a few practices that I think have been emerging here, and that are also just good practices to remember when it comes to any sort of platform thing. And the first one, to kind of codify a lot of what I've been saying, is there's this notion, kind of an older notion, called platform as a product. And that notion, as exemplified by Thomas here at Mercedes, he used to run their Cloud Foundry platform as a service, and now he's in charge of that and their Kubernetes stuff, which is a thrilling comparison for him to be running his head all the time. But as he's saying here, when you're building a platform, you think about the developers as your customers. You think, we are, of course, we're making sure things are secure and reliable and performant and all of that. But we're also thinking about, so the people using our platform are developers, they're our customers. What do they do? What do they need to make things easier? How could I improve the if you prefer to say it, the capability we're providing to them, right? How can I product manage what I'm doing for them? And I think, obviously, well, to most people, obviously, what you do with AI is no different than that. But keep that in mind, right? If you're setting up these things, are you talking to your customers, your developers frequently? Are you observing if what you have provided them is useful? Do they like it? Is it serving their needs? And as you get that feedback, are you going back and tuning and redoing and improving how you're providing these services? Now, to that end, speaking of I guess in banking, it usually means something else. Speaking of know your customer, I think there's a new type of customer, if you will, for platforms. I alluded to it with that block talk. But one, you still have programmers, of course. Programmers who, if they can't use publicly hosted code generation stuff, or kind of instrumenting the developer workflow with, right now, little MCP things. You have that constituency that would like to be using things. And then there's also kind of the data scientists who, for example, people running Jupyter Notebook or other things like that. They also need a platform, or they will very soon. And then there's all the other obvious thing, what platforms usually do. You're writing applications. You want to include some AI stuff in there. That's right where a platform is helpful and specializes. But there's this other category, let's call them the normals, or if you're a Harry Potter fan, the muggles, right? The people who are not technical, and they're using things like a desktop app, like Goose, or I forget, there's that web-based one that's named something like OpenWeb, which is a tragic name for something, because it doesn't really tell you what it is, and I can't remember it, or maybe I can. But, in a private cloud context, people are being given just, here's a chat app, and then hook it up to something, right? That is your own models that you're running, and that is probably a new customer, a new constituency for infrastructure, operations, platform engineer type of people who are running a model like this. It's worth checking out that Angie talk to kind of dive into what that is, but it's a whole new area to take a look at. So next, probably in your organization, you have a center of excellence for anything that's new and should be excellent. If you remember, we used to have cloud centers of excellence. Maybe we still do. I haven't checked in on that. But there are no doubt, whatever name they have, there's probably AI centers of excellence, or roundtables of architects or policy people or whatever. And their job, well, I shouldn't say their job. Unfortunately, what ends up happening is they usually become, centers of excellent bottlenecks, of slowing things down instead of necessarily accelerating them. Or not even accelerating, just allowing them to go at a pace. And I think what a few organizations I've talked with or heard about have found is that if you want to speed that up, there's basically two groups that you should get involved at a minimum and maybe a maximum. And that is the security people, who typically, even though they can be a little orny and kind of annoying to deal with, they actually are pretty good at this kind of process. Understanding something, doing the risk modeling for it, and making a ruling on it. It's kind of what they do, not every day, but a lot of. So you get them involved, and then everyone's number one favorite organization to get involved, well, I guess their least favorite is procurement. But right up after that, legal. So there's a whole lot of weird ambiguity and things when it comes to laws with AI stuff. So your legal people are going to want to get involved. And if you get them involved early on in these centers of excellence, that mix of those two roles at several organizations has actually sped that up more than people expected. And then you can start going through and approving the models that you use and how you want to use them, and so forth and so on. So, I think the main sort of the strategic way of thinking about a lot of this stuff that we learned, if you remember you remember the digital transformation era when Airbnb was going to destroy all hotel chains and Google was going to destroy all of banking and Tesla was going to destroy, basically every single company, tech company was going to destroy the existing ones. And, I don't know about you, but I've been enjoying none of the companies that existed in 2015 existing anymore. I just work with those new ones, which is to say they all adapted and did just fine. But back then what we learned is that if you don't really know what you're doing, you should do a lot of it quickly. Now, of course, you need to do it in a very structured way, right? So if you're not sure, like most organizations are, what exactly that organization is going to do with AI stuff, generative AI, whatever, it's good to set up a sandbox, a practice, a way of very quickly, iteratively going over things and doing ideas. And that, thankfully, is what platforms are kind of built for. Having that very structured environment that lets developers focus only on the applications, the business ideas, if you prefer, instead of building all the infrastructure and other things, and also gives you a tremendous amount of control over it. So platforms should have a great role to play in what's going on now. So if you're interested in that, some people are lucky enough to actually have this stuff just over in a data center somewhere, if you know the people to track down. I was actually here at a more internal ING event, kind of going over putting kicking off the whole VMware and Tanzu and VCF stack as a way of doing things. And so to that end, definitely if you're an ING employee, you find the person and you can ask them about testing this stuff out and using it. And if you don't know them, I can tell you who they are. And if you're not, you can actually get our platform for doing this. I'm not supposed to say free, but you can get a 90-day trial without paying for it. So I'll let you figure out how much you pay for it. But you can try that out as well if you go check that out, which you should. It'll be fantastic. So that's it. If you're interested in those slides or checking out more things, there's a thrilling QR code for you. And thanks.